I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. President Trump is in China, where he's expected to ask President Xi Jinping to do more to pressure North Korea to abandon its nuclear weapons program. Before arriving in Beijing, Trump told the South Korean National Assembly that responsible nations must join forces to isolate North Korea. A federal court will hold a full hearing on a challenge to the latest version of President Trump's travel ban on December 8th. A judge granted a nationwide preliminary injunction against the ban last month, which aimed to place travel restrictions on citizens of 8 countries. The State Department announced new restrictions on U.S. travel to Cuba. Dozens of hotels and businesses are now off limits for U.S. citizens after they were blacklisted for alleged links to the Cuban military. Rules requiring U.S. visitors to always be with licensed tour operators will also be reinstated. And Senator Rand Paul says he suffered broken ribs and fluid buildup in his lungs when a neighbor tackled him outside his home last week. Rene Boucher has been charged with assault. Paul tweeted his thanks today to his supporters, saying, quote, "I appreciate all of the support from everyone." Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg, and Bloomberg Technology is next.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, a Bloomberg scoop. Apple dives deeper into AR and could have an augmented reality headset in stores by 2019. How the new device will stack up against the competition. Plus, Postmates steps up its deliveries game. The startup expanding further into food and groceries to go head-to-head with Amazon. CEO Bastian Lehmann joins us to discuss the move. And Steve Ballmer's take on the tax plan and tech testimony on Capitol Hill. The LA Clippers owner and former Microsoft CEO joins us for a wide-ranging interview, how his new venture intends to hold the government accountable for achieving tax goals. But first, to our lead. Bloomberg is reporting that Apple is said to be developing an augmented reality headset that could be in stores by 2019. A couple of things will set this apart from existing available AR devices. One, it will contain its own display, so you won't have to insert your smartphone and into the rig. It'll also have a dedicated operating system. Now, this isn't Apple's first foray into the world of augmented reality. The company first began putting together a team to work on AR-related projects a couple of years ago. Its first product was AR Kit, tools that let developers create AR apps for iPhones and iPads. Join me now to give us all the details on all of this, Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman. Who broke this story? So what do we know about this headset?
We know a lot. I think we have an in-depth look at a bunch of different projects they're working on. At Apple, there's this team codenamed T288. They're working on 2 headsets. They're working on new software features for AR Kit on the iPhone. The first headset they're working on is the big one, the one you were talking about. It's a standalone headset that runs its own operating system and doesn't need to have an iPhone attached to it. But they're also working on a more interim, near-term headset that's sort of like an Oculus Gear VR, where you actually put the phone into it and strap it on your head. They don't actually plan to sell this. This is something that they're doing for testing, leveraging the AR functionality that's already baked into the iPhone. And
it very much seems they're focusing on AR versus VR, right?
Yeah, that's right. Tim Cook has been very clear about how Apple thinks that AR is the more mainstream feature, and I tend to agree. VR has great applications for gaming or education environments, but AR is something like a watch or a phone that you can use in your day-to-day life. Apple wants to make things that they can get people to line up for. Gaming headset, the market is much more niche, whereas an AR headset has several different applications.
I spoke with Tim Cook earlier this year. I asked him about AR and how Apple is thinking about it. Take a listen to what he had to say.
With a core technology and as a platform owner, the first thing, and arguably in some ways the most important, is to build the foundation. And then from that foundation, you can do many things off of it. But first, you have to have a really solid foundation. And so I think the developers are really going to love what they find in the developer build on AR Kit.
So he's talking about AR Kit there for developers. Talk to us how you see, based on that and what you know now, how Apple is sort of differentiating or marking its territory, let's say, in the AR VR space.
So AR Kit is very important. And like you said, they are marking their territory because they're creating an ecosystem of developers who will begin to create AR apps looking toward this headset, 2 or 3 years from now. They're also putting themselves out there and saying, hey, we're an AR company. We're doing this. This is a big focus for us. And they're not just talking anymore. There was about a 6-month, 8-month period of time where Apple was talking up to AR, Tim Cook specifically, bragging about it, talking about how it's the next big thing. But to see how quickly they begin to actually back that up and show their cards with AR Kit is a big step for the company.
And what sort of applications do you imagine? Real world applications?
So for this headset, they're developing a new operating system, which is extraordinarily significant because that means that they're all in on this. An OS called ROS, which is similar to iOS on the phone or watchOS on the Apple Watch. And this is going to have all sorts of applications. It's going to be an iPhoneized version of AR. It's called Reality Operating System. Things like maps, text messages, virtual meeting rooms with avatars, watching 360-degree video with the video projected into your eyes, all sorts of stuff that you can imagine on a headset.
So you got another scoop also on the iPad. We saw strong numbers on the iPad when Apple reported earnings, which in some ways is surprising because there has been concern that the iPad was on its way out, but clearly not if you look at the sales, and now they're working on a new one.
Right, so what they did starting at the end of 2015 is they sort of moved the iPad from the iPad to an iPad Pro, sort of positioning it as a little bit more of a computer replacement, something with a keyboard.
And they got rid of the Mini.
They still sell the Mini, but they haven't updated it, and it's very unlikely they're going to update it again due to the cannibalization by the bigger iPhones and now the iPhone 10. But anyways, back to the iPad. They moved toward this iPad Pro structure, and a lot of people have been liking the keyboards and the Apple Pencil stylus, so they're going all in on that Pro approach. And now at the low end, they have a $330 regular iPad with that 10-inch screen. Now they have the iPad Pros. They updated those in June, and the 10.5-inch model, which I use as well. I think it's great, and it's become extraordinarily popular. Nobody can say enough good things about that one.
So again, we're seeing a family of devices, just like we're seeing with the phone, in a range of price range. How do you see the cannibalization evolving? Like, what gets cannibalized, and what becomes the big category? Or do they all?
Right. I mean, we thought it had to be something, right? We thought the iPad was going to cannibalize the Mac as Mac sales started to slow down a couple of years ago. And then what started to happen in 2015 is iPad sales started to slow down and Mac sales both would shoot up. So we're like, oh, is the Mac back and cannibalizing the iPad? But here we are in their Q4 earnings from a week ago, and they presented higher numbers, strong, very strong actually, year-over-year unit and revenue growth in both the Mac and iPad categories. So it's basically the opposite of what everyone was expecting. There's no cannibalization going on either end. Will it happen eventually? It will have to, but I think it's going to be a while.
Rising tide lifting all boats. All right, Mark Gurman, as always, our consumer tech reporter. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
In Washington, a Senate panel questioned former Yahoo CEO Marissa Mayer about the threat of hackers. This after an attack that compromised virtually all of Yahoo's 3 billion accounts. Mayer warned that breaches are only getting more potent.
To this day, we, as I understand it, still have not been able to identify the intrusion that led to that theft, which is to say we have received files from law enforcement that contained Yahoo data. We verified that it came from Yahoo. We don't exactly understand how the act was perpetrated.
Meanwhile, Equifax's new CEO, Paulino Dorrego Barros, also spoke before the Senate committee, adding the companies are bolstering their defenses after the high-profile hacks. Coming up, another food delivery startup gearing up to take on Amazon Fresh and Instacart. Details on Postmates expansion into online delivery, grocery delivery, next. Walmart's membership-only club, Sam's Club, and Chinese e-commerce company JD.com are teaming up to offer online to offline delivery of fresh produce and frozen products to consumers in China. The new service provides same-day delivery of more than 300 items, including imported meats, seafood, ice cream, and local delicacies. The service premiered in Beijing and Shanghai earlier this year. Walmart's partnership with JD.com has allowed Sam's Club to expand its reach to the majority of the nation, thanks in part to JD's delivery and warehouse infrastructure. Meantime, Postmates is looking to bring customers groceries in 30 minutes or less. The U.S. startup has announced it'll expand beyond food delivery and introduce a new service called Postmates Fresh, an online grocery shopping platform. Postmates is backed by nearly $300 million and will use some of its venture capital to undercut fees charged by Amazon and Instacart. The feature is being offered today in New York, LA, and its hometown of San Francisco to start. Joining me now, Bastian, Lehmann, Postmates CEO, and it's called Postmates Fresh, which has a familiar ring to it.
You know, we felt since so many companies want to be like Postmates, we can also borrow a name from another company that wants to be like us.
All right, you're taking on Amazon. What makes you think you could do that?
Well, first of all, we're doing something very specific. We're delivering groceries to you extremely fast. 30-minute average delivery window. We have a highly curated selection of SKUs, so we're not trying to be Whole Foods. It's a lot more like a Trader Joe's concept, and we believe that our customer base really, really wants access to high-quality produce extremely fast.
And what grocery stores are you partnering with?
It's a bunch of them all over the 3 cities that we're operating in. Urban Radish is one, for example, in LA. It's family-owned. It's part of the community there. That's kind of the concept.
What about Trader Joe's?
Not with Trader Joe's.
Trader Joe's is a favorite. You got to get Trader Joe's.
It's a favorite, but we like to control the operations here. So we work with places that do the pick and pack for us, that handle the on-the-ground logistics so that we can just do the delivery component.
Now, talk to me about the infrastructure. What makes you able to deliver food that quickly and at that price?
Right.
And is that sustainable?
Yeah, we're making money on it. It is sustainable. $3.99. It's a great price. Emily, there's 150,000 Postmates doing deliveries in 250 cities in the U.S. We've spent the last 5-6 years building out that infrastructure. Now it's running. It's very successful with prepared food, as you know, and that allows us to attack these new verticals and do it in a very price-efficient way.
There's a lot of food delivery companies that have come and gone since we've been talking over the years. You know, where do you see this space going? I mean, do you see just 1 or 2 leaders? Do you see, you know, that there will always be a large number of competitors? Like, what separates the wheat from the chaff?
So first of all, I think if you look at local commerce, $2.6 trillion market in the United States, it's still highly underpenetrated. Only 3.4% of that is actually happening online. Food is $550 billion of that. $600 billion of that is groceries. So even with the competitors in this space, the market is still very nascent. It's very young. Everybody is growing and can grab market share. So I think this will go on for a while.
And you're expanding globally. Tell us about your plans.
We're launching in Mexico next week. We're launching in Hawaii. It's not really globally, but...
I'm from Hawaii, so Hawaii is part of the United States.
Honolulu, we're super excited about it. But Mexico City is the first international city. We're launching there on the 15th next week, and from there on we have our eyes on Canada. We look at more countries in South America, and we also believe that there are some Asian markets that are interested.
Now, as a customer, you know, I understand you have cheaper options, you have subscription options, but oftentimes when I go to Postmates and I get my, you know, order rung up, it says that the delivery is $16.
Right.
You know, how do you get around that? Or is this just something that's going to cost more and the customers who want it are going to have to pay for it?
So, 2 things. The first one is we have the lowest delivery fees in the market. $3.99, no service fee, no markup for 25,000 merchants. We used to have a delivery fee that's based by distance. That's gone as well. So even for out-of-network merchants, the highest delivery fee...
For restaurants too?
That is right. The highest delivery fee that you will see is $5.99. It is never higher than $5.99. And what we actually did last month is we decreased our consumer prices by 32%.
Right. Which brings me to the question, you've raised $300 million. Can you actually can this be profitable at that price?
Absolutely. We, as a company, we're profitable on a contribution margin basis. Half of the markets we're operating in generate revenue and profit for the company, a milestone that we achieved 2 or 3 months ago. We're extremely excited about it. We have gross profit margins that we're very excited about, around 40% currently. That's up over 10 percentage points from last year. We're doing everything we can to create a business that's sustainable in the long run while growing extremely fast.
And what kind of money are the Postmates taking home?
It depends. They get compensated per delivery, as you know, and there is a bracket that earns $25, there's a bracket that earns $18, and there's people and couriers that can earn $30, $40 an hour.
So Mexico next. What's after that?
Mexico, South America, as I said earlier, very interested, Canada, and parts of Asia.
All right. Well, thanks for explaining it, breaking it all down. Postmates Fresh, Bastian Lehmann, CEO of Postmates. Always great to have you here on the show. Coming up, Uber is teaming up with NASA. That's right, NASA to get its flying car tech off the ground. Details on that next. This is Bloomberg.
% of the S&P 500 members, MACDs, are signaling
AT&T is ready to go to court with the United States government over its bid to buy Time Warner. Antitrust officials want AT&T to sell assets, either its own or some that it would acquire in the $85 billion deal. But deciding which ones is proving to be a stumbling block. Among those assets could be the AT&T-owned DirecTV or Time Warner-owned Turner Broadcasting, which includes CNN. The timing of the deal, originally expected to close by the end of the year, is now uncertain. Well, Uber has teamed up with NASA to bring its flying taxi service Uber Air one step closer to takeoff. The partnership will focus on new technology to manage air traffic and give Uber a bridge to regulators. Uber's Chief Product Officer, Jeff Holden, spoke exclusively to Bloomberg at the Web Summit in Lisbon ahead of the announcement, and he says collaborating with NASA will boost Uber Air's speed to market.
NASA is the inventor of new airspace management technology. It's a framework, essentially, or standard called UTM, which is Unmanned Aerial Systems Traffic Management. And the reason this is important is because with Uber Air, we're going to be having a lot of aircraft flying over cities, an unprecedented number of aircraft flying over cities. And in order to manage that air traffic in a way that's efficient and safe, we just need new technology. The UTM, we believe, is the answer to that. And there's a lot of people who believe that. It's pretty widely accepted at this point. The Space Act represents a formal collaboration agreement between Uber and NASA. And many people forget that NASA is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. They actually, focus a ton of their energy on aviation. So since they're the developer of this technology and they are very connected and engaged with regulatory bodies around it as well, this collaboration makes a ton of sense in order to bring this to market as fast as possible. And it's a part of making this Uber Air vision a reality.
That's exciting.
Yes.
And NASA is a big partner.
Yeah.
But the cynic would say this is pie in the sky thinking. What is NASA's involvement mean for the reality of Uber Air actually happening?
Oh, well, so the way we're approaching it is we are not boiling the ocean and trying to change all the airspace technology at the same time. NASA's developing the framework, and they have a whole kind of model for testing it under different conditions, the technical capability level approaches, and we're engaging with them in the last stage of that called technical capability level 4. This is about working in sort of dense urban environments, and so we're already very advanced and far along with their process, but we are actually, Uber is developing the technology to implement this. So we will actually be building the actual technology that the aircraft will talk to in actually managing and navigating airspace. And we're also trying not to boil the ocean, as I mentioned, and change this all at once, but instead work next to existing air traffic control systems and implement UTM on just areas like corridors through classically controlled air traffic, airspace. And so this approach is kind of like, crawl before you walk, walk before you run, in combination with us building the technology and NASA bringing their expertise on airspace and simulation environments and that type of thing, is a perfect gathering of kind of the forces and skills to make this happen as fast as possible.
One big question for VTOL is batteries, right? And when you're developing the craft itself, there's an issue over size and weight.
Yes.
Have you thought about that? What is the next step for Uber in looking at battery research? Is that another thing that you could be moving into to speed up the wider project?
Yeah, well, battery research is something we're looking at very closely right now. We may have some announcements on this in the future, but you can assume that we're going to be digging into that deeply. The battery technology of today will actually let us do, if we were to take literally the lithium-ion batteries of today and package them up the right way for an Elevate vehicle, for an Uber Air vehicle, we could actually fly a subset of our missions. So on the order of kind of 25 miles, not 60 miles. We have a 60-mile target for our launch in 2023. Again, we're launching demonstrators in 2020, but by 2023 we want to be doing our full missions. And so that there's some advancement that needs to happen on the battery, but we think it's actually very realistic. But it does require real work, and it requires not just doing the work on the actual underlying technology, but also mass manufacturing of those batteries. So we have to solve both of those problems, and Uber will play a role in that.
Regulation. Yeah. How difficult is that going to be?
You know, it's appropriately difficult. It's not. You know, we've been pleasantly surprised. I mean, we took the approach from the beginning of embracing the regulatory regime. You know, FAA, EASA, obviously NASA plays a portion of this. The air traffic control kind of environment, et cetera. There's a ton of different regulatory stuff down even at the community level. There's ordinances, noise ordinances. There's zoning regulations, and we're just sort of you know, taking in sort of Uber style. We're just focusing on the outcome that we're trying to achieve, and we're working closely with regulators to make this a reality. Now, that isn't necessarily Uber's kind of history. A lot of people think we would just kind of like run in and just try to make it happen, and but what we found is two things. One thing we found and one thing is just true. One thing we found is that the regulators are embracing this, and I think it's the excitement of the vision that gets everyone rallied around it, and it's also the believability of ride sharing in the sky. It just seems like a super a reasonable business model, and I think everybody really believes that they'll be able to push a button and get a flight with this model. The other piece is that Uber's just grown up as a company, and what we do today as a large company on the global stage, we just have to be much more thoughtful and careful, and our approach has to be different from when we were the kind of scrappy startup. And so those two things have come together to sort of inform our regulatory approach.
That was Uber Chief Product Officer Jeff Holden. Well, Apple already made a big splash in the original content race when it announced it was investing $1 billion in video. Now it has outbid one of its chief rivals, Netflix, for a new show starring Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. The as-yet unnamed show will be the first recurring TV role for Aniston since Friends. It'll be set in the world of morning television. You can now add the two award-winning actresses to Apple's growing stable of content creators, one that already includes Steven Spielberg. Coming up, a November surprise for Snap investors as China's Tencent buys a 10% stake. What does Tencent see in the company, and can the move give some life to the struggling startup after a tough quarter? This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. One of the first women to publicly accuse a powerful man of sexual harassment criticized President Trump, saying his language normalizes predatory behavior. Anita Hill spoke to Bloomberg editor-in-chief John Micklethwait at the Year Ahead event.
What is deeply troubling about his language was not only the normalizing of this predatory behavior, but was the sense of his entitlement to behave in a certain way.
UK Cabinet Minister Priti Patel has resigned. She is the second cabinet minister to resign this week. Patel stepped down after failing to inform UK Prime Minister Theresa May or the UK Foreign Office of her meetings with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in August. It also emerged that she had suggested giving British aid money to an Israeli army project. TV ratings for the National Football League are down another year. That is in addition to the 8% drop last year for America's most popular sport. Bloomberg's David Weston asked NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell today if the national anthem controversy is driving the decline.
I don't think there's a silver bullet I don't think there's one thing that we've focused on. What we look at is everything, and we don't dismiss anything. We look to see, could that be a factor? But I think the big issue here is just the changing media landscape, and the pace of change is so rapid here.
Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in Washington, already 6:30 Thursday morning in Hong Kong. We are joined by Bloomberg's David Ingles with a look at the markets. David, a remarkable head higher here. All three of the main benchmarks ended a record high.
Yeah, well, I'm not feeling the tailwind here, Lisa. Good morning from Hong Kong. So just 30 minutes from the start of the proceedings over in Sydney, we're likely looking at a mixed open, when you let's put it that way, across markets in the Asia Pacific. I mean, New Zealand's been up and running for about an hour or so already, and you do see some weakness there already, about half of 1%. Now, that being said, a lot of earnings coming through, about 70 companies to react to or to look forward to over in Japan. There's a lot of data coming through as well, most important of which would be inflation data out of China. 3 rate decisions in Asia Pacific. One's already out, RBNZ. We're already seeing some substantial movement there in the Kiwi dollar. So let's see how the day progresses here across the Asia Pacific. Looking like a mixed open when the major markets open up here. I'm David Ingles in Hong Kong. More from Bloomberg Technologies next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. It has been a wild 24 hours for Snap. Investors dumping the stock at a rapid pace in the session, turning the worst performance since May. Sluggish user growth remains a top concern, despite Chinese tech giant Tencent buying up a big stake in the company. Here to help us break it all down, we're joined by Sarah Fryer, who covers the company for Bloomberg Tech. So first of all, tell us the details of this deal. How's this going to work?
So this is a great time to be buying up Snap stock, as it's really declined since the IPO. For Tencent, this deal is not hostile, according to our sources, but strategic, and they will be giving input on Snap's direction, which I think is very interesting because, you know, Evan Spiegel, the leader of Snapchat, is very set in his vision for the company. And what we saw yesterday with the earnings is that he's been willing to evolve that vision and actually said that he would redesign the app to make it more appealing to a broad audience.
Earnings yesterday, not good. We actually have a chart here, #BTV5317, showing what happened. The stock dropped after hours, spiked back up after this Tencent deal news. You know, what can we expect going forward?
Well, Tencent has had a habit of buying up stakes in companies and then eventually taking them over. Does not look like that is what's happening here, at least at the outset. It makes more sense to see whether Snap can go it on its own and really build this advertising business. What we saw in the last quarter is that they're really at the beginning of this self-serve advertising, and that they need some time to prove to advertisers that they can get a return on investment before that becomes a bigger business for them.
Tencent, of course, is also the owner of WeChat. Do we expect Tencent to have an input here in product decisions, in strategy decisions, given this size of their stake?
I think they'll have some voice in strategy, absolutely. And the other thing to look at here is Evan has always had an admiration for WeChat and Tencent and how they've built it. He's spoken about that in his public appearances. This is something that he has some reverence for, unlike, he's made some veiled comments against Facebook and how they've built their app. I think he does see Snap as more of a messaging platform than a social network.
All right, Sarah Fryer, Bloomberg Tech, covering Snapchat for us. Thank you, as always. Meantime, the Senate is still hammering away on details for tax reform, with plans to unveil a version of the bill on Thursday. Earlier, I caught up with Steve Ballmer, owner of the LA Clippers, co-founder of the Ballmer Group and former CEO of Microsoft, to discuss what we know so far about the GOP tax overhaul plan.
A couple things. Number one, what we're trying to do is make sure at USA Facts that people can take a look at the plan in the context of history. That's important. Number two, you've got to ask, what are the goals of this plan? Because we want to be able, through the data, to hold government accountable for achieving the goals. Is the goal to improve standard of living, and if so, from whom? Is the goal to redistribute money? If so, is the goal to make businesses more effective? Is the goal to borrow from our future? In my own case, I'm partisan on a couple of issues. Number one, I do believe in balancing the budget. Will we achieve that, or will we not? Will jobs grow or not to support that? Open question that'll need to be assessed over time. And I care a lot about opportunities for kids that are born in tough situations. And I got to say, I wish there was a little more in the plan from a tax perspective to support those low-income kids.
Let's talk about Microsoft. You're one of Microsoft's largest shareholders. I mean, would you like to see a provision, for example, whereby companies, when they repatriate cash, they have to invest in jobs, they have to hire more people in the United States, or let's say invest 10% in R&D?
Well, I think that simplifying the tax code on companies with foreign earnings is important. I think letting U.S. companies be competitive internationally, now I'm speaking as a former CEO as opposed to head of USA Fact, I think those things are important. Society does have to decide whether those things are going to accrue to the benefit of people who own shares, or whether somehow people who own shares are going to wind up redistributing some of that tax gain to other people in society, either through the kinds of requirements that you talked about for reinvestment in R&D and new jobs, or simply by, in other forms, increasing the taxes on shareholders as opposed to the taxes on corporations to be revenue and income neutral so that shareholders don't necessarily see a windfall.
Microsoft has a huge operation in Puerto Rico. The House bill would put a 20% tax on offshore affiliates, including Puerto Rico, even though it's part of the United States. This would significantly change Microsoft's tax bill. It wouldn't be good for Apple either. How concerned are you about this?
Well, I'm not concerned about it at all. I think in the long run, this notion of becoming more competitive and more consistent with global tax standards will be a very good thing. Companies like Microsoft and Apple do owe it to their shareholders to do the best job that they can to optimize taxes in the context of the tax code. These companies, including my former company, Microsoft, have done that. I think just my quick read is there's not likely to be much difference in terms of profits that are available for the shareholders of these big companies.
Some of my conversation earlier with Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer. All right, coming up, one real estate company attracting a lot of investor eyes and money. We look at how Compass is using technology to try and change the housing market. That's next. This is Bloomberg. A New York real estate startup is trying to reshape the home buying process through technology, and investors are taking note. Compass just secured $100 million in funding from Fidelity, IVP, and Wellington. With that infusion, Compass is valued at $1.8 billion, solidifying its unicorn status. The company is betting that technology that features a dashboard of neighborhood data and a Pinterest-like app for organizing home listings will make real estate agents more productive and profitable. Joining me now, Compass CEO Robert Reffkin. Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a great day for Compass. It's great to be here.
So talk to us about how you really differentiate yourself from the competition.
Yeah, so Compass is a technology company, and we have a team of in-house engineers from places like Facebook, Google, and Twitter that are building an end-to-end platform for agents to manage and grow their business all in one place.
So how is this different than Redfin? How is this different than Zillow?
Yeah, so aggregators are focused on search. We're focused on the entire transaction. Building workflow and productivity tools for agents to help clients tour properties, negotiate, and ultimately close.
And how would you say it's different than from traditional brokerages? Because your competition says it's sleek, but it's, we do the same thing, essentially.
Yeah, so traditional brokerage firms don't have an engineer to build tools. Everything's outsourced between 270 software providers. We're building tools all on one platform and one system.
So $100 million, what do you plan to spend that on?
So we plan to invest and grow. We want to be everywhere, every major market in this country and ultimately the world. And we want to invest in our agents and invest in more technology.
And how fast are you growing now? What can you tell us about your footprint?
Yeah, so our revenue's doubled year over year. We have over 2,000 agents across 40 offices. And next year, we're going to launch another 10 major markets.
When you're raising $100 million at a $1.8 billion valuation, in these times, there's concerns about, what valuation is too high? Can you live up to it? What's the risk that you consider when making a decision like that?
Yeah, look, we could have raised it a higher valuation. And I agree with that. You don't want to raise it a valuation that allows you to continue to make investors money and you can continue to grow into over time.
You're also facing some lawsuits, some folks who say, perhaps you've taken proprietary technology, that the data can be misleading. What's your response to that?
Yeah, we haven't been sued for over a year. I think there's a misconception in the market. Agents are independent contractors. They have a right to work wherever they want. My mom is an agent, has been for over 20 years. And wherever the firm can help agents make the most money, and wherever agents can have the best quality of life because they have the best tools, they deserve to have a chance to move there.
I'm curious about your thoughts on the tax plan and then the new potential limit of $500,000 as opposed to $1 million for mortgage interest deductions.
Yeah, if there's anything about this administration, it's unpredictable.
Right.
So I don't place a lot of confidence that it's going to get through. I think your guess is as good as mine.
What about housing prices in general? And how does this uncertainty affect housing prices?
Yeah, we are seeing in the high end a concern and a small slowdown, but in the mass market, we're pretty bullish. And if you look at real estate analysts, the estimates are between 2 and 12% growth for next year.
You worked at Goldman Sachs for a long time. You were chief of staff to Gary Cohn, who's now working in the administration. What's your thoughts on bankers moving into Washington, into roles such as that?
I don't think about bankers moving into roles in Wall Street. I'm thinking about Compass every single day. I wake up in the morning thinking, how can we build a company that makes agents more productive? The average agent came here and grew their business 24.9% in their first year, and I want that to be more.
All right, Robert Reffkin, Compass CEO. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to have you here on the show. All right, coming up, could subscriptions one day replace video game sales? Electronic Arts CEO Andrew Wilson says it's possible. Our exclusive interview with Wilson next. This is Bloomberg.
From New York City for our viewers worldwide, this is Bloomberg Daybreak.
How mindful are you of the possibility of what the markets talk about as a trade war?
We've been in a trade war for decades.
The next 2 years are going to be very uncertain.
So you have Brexit uncertainty. To use your word, you have Trumponomics uncertainty.
They have been front and center in selling assets to help their debt, but now it's going to be about growth.
The latest edition of the video game series Call of Duty is a blockbuster. Activision Blizzard's Call of Duty World War II had more than $500 million in sales in its first 3 days on the market. It sold twice as many units as last year's edition of Call of Duty did in its opening weekend. The new release also set the first day record for full game downloads on PlayStation 4. And sticking with video games, Electronic Arts has conquered the video game market after making some of the top console games in the world, like FIFA and Battlefield and The Sims. But in 2013, EA was named the worst company in America by a consumer blog post, just one, but 2 years in a row, and social and mobile gaming took off. That's when CEO John Riccitiello left the company and longtime EA employee Andrew Wilson stepped in. I sat down with EA CEO Andrew Wilson for another edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0 and asked why we haven't seen cloud-based gaming take off and if that could change.
I think the greatest disruptor to the consumption of entertainment media in the last 5 years has been the combination of streaming plus subscription. It's changed the way we watch television, it's changed the way we listen to music, it's changed the way I read books. The notion that it wouldn't impact our industry, I think is naive. Will it take a little bit longer? Yes, for a whole bunch of reasons. File size, level of interactivity, design. Whether you listen to, Led Zeppelin album on your phone or in your car or on your PC at home, it doesn't change. When we design a game that lives in a true streaming world, we have to think about screen size and session time. How does a Madden game that exists in the cloud manifest on your mobile phone 1 minute at a time? How does it manifest on your 60-inch TV an hour at a time? And how does it manifest on the dashboard of your car as you drive to work? It's a design challenge there. So we've got technology challenges with bandwidth and file size. We've got design challenges as you go from screen to screen, moment to moment gameplay. But I do believe it will play an important part in our world in the future, the same way it does in music, movies, TV, books.
Your competitors, Activision and Riot, are selling franchises to their games for tens of millions of dollars. What's EA's esports strategy?
We launched our second year for Madden competitive gaming. We were the first partner of an official sports league where we got all teams and all players involved. We're very excited about that. We're going to second year of our FIFA competitive gaming, and we've also announced that we have Battlefield competitive gaming coming. We saw exponential growth in engagement. Players who engaged in our FIFA competitive modes engaged at 3 times the rate of people that didn't. And so we have maintained for some time, as did Riot in the early years, that competitive gaming is a way to engage a player base in the 2 greatest positive motivators of human behavior: social connection and competition.
How big do you think esports are going to be?
Human beings love to watch anything where the best in the world are doing it and the stakes are high. Take something that literally 2.5 billion people do on the planet, and you have an audience ready to engage. And what we're seeing now is the great players amongst that 2.5 billion players are rising to the top, and the stakes are high. When you watch our games being played, it's true entertainment. And these are the best in the world doing it, and the stakes are high. So I think it's going to be big.
Rogue One did half the box office of The Force Awakens. Overall, Star Wars merchandise sales are slower than when Disney's first reboot came out. Can your Star Wars Battlefront 2 game do as well as the first?
What we have done is listen to our community. What they said about our first Battlefront game that they bought a great many units of was, this is an amazing game, but it needs to be bigger, it needs to be broader, it needs to be deeper, it needs a single-player campaign, it needs space battles, it needs more complexity in player evolution inside the game. So we have built a game that's 3 times the size of the first one. It is 3 times broader, 3 times deeper. It has space battles. It has a single-player campaign. We are doing everything in our power to deliver to our, very, very large Star Wars community the game they want.
How do you think about the ability to potentially deepen your relationship with Disney?
We've got a great relationship with Disney. I think they have some wonderful IP, and if there was an opportunity to do more with them, we would, because they've been wonderful partners, and I think we complement what they do. And I think if there's an opportunity to do that again, we would jump at the chance.
Would there ever come a day when you don't release new titles on your franchises every year and just release online content like Take-Two does with Grand Theft Auto?
The short answer is yes. There's a few different things that's got to happen first. We do a lot in a FIFA game every year and a lot in a Madden game. There's a lot of code that we make available as part of the new iteration. But when we look at what we do in Korea or China, we don't do it that way. About every 4 years we release a new big code drop, and we offer incremental change over time. So what we see in Korea and China, what we see on mobile, I think there's a world where that might also happen in other parts of our business.
Apple has been pushing to become a bigger platform in games. It still hasn't happened. Do you think that will happen for Apple?
The App Store is a pretty big business. And up until recently, games have been the lion's share of that business. What we're starting to see now is subscription services like Spotify and Netflix and Pandora and YouTube and Tidal rise to the top of the app charts. And that's partly because Apple and others have come to understand that subscription is a really, really valuable way to engage with the consumer base. Valuable for the person providing the subscription and value for the subscriber. It is a friction-free way of ingesting large amounts of content. And so I think that they are doing a great job. And I think that you will see games continue to be a big part of their app store. But what you might start to see is the business model around games change. And we're getting ready for that.
How is the business model going to change?
Well, so if you think about, free-to-play is a wonderful business model in mobile, and it has allowed mobile to become, as big as the console platforms in terms of overall game revenue. But we are seeing a propensity for App Store users to engage in Netflix and Spotify and Tidal and Pandora and some random dating apps. And they're doing that through subscription. And so we're looking at the business and saying, okay, is there a way we can offer great value to players through subscription and mobile? And I don't think we're there yet, but it's something that we're looking at.
Part of our exclusive interview there with Electronic Arts CEO Andrew Wilson. You can check out the full conversation on Bloomberg Studio 1.0 tonight, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Check it out. And finally, shares of Roku are jumping, and after hours trading, the company, which just went public in September, beat sales projections in its first earnings report, bolstered by rising advertising revenue and a nearly 50% increase in active user accounts. While the majority of Roku's revenue comes from sales of its devices, the company has also been generating more from its platform businesses, which includes a cut of the subscription or advertising revenue for video streamed through its platform. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. A reminder, we are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.